Hello, and thanks so much for tuning in to Clear into Balance. My name is Jamie, and on this channel, I remind you that you are a powerful spirit having this human experience, and therefore you can change or create anything you want. Today, I want to talk about the importance of clearing the metaphysics of a space that we live in. So whether you're living in a space already while you're coming across this information, or maybe you're getting ready to move into a new place to rent or to buy that other people have lived in already. And I think from my own experience that this is more important than clearing out the physical. It's more important than cleaning carpets, wiping things down, cleaning floors, painting walls, because the energies of things that have happened in these spaces exist long after the people who created it move out. And it's especially important if we know, or see, we don't always know, so this is why I think it's important to do it anyway, if drugs have been used in the space, if a lot of alcohol has been drank in the space, because that also allows for things to come into the space that are impacting the energy of the place. So I had the experience of clearing out two places now that I've lived in. One, I lived in for almost 10 years, and it wasn't until I'd been there for years and years that I actually cleared it. The current place that I live in right now, I cleared before I even moved in, because I knew with it being over 100-year-old house divided up into rentals, so it's been a long-term rental property, I knew that there were going to be things in here that could potentially affect me negatively. And with all the clearing that I've done on my own issues, I'm not about to move into a place and have myself negatively affected or impacted and have my life impacted by any energies outside of myself. So I nipped that in the bud, had it cleared right away. The surrogate team in Australia that works with the founder of Holographic Kinetics does these clearings for people from a distance, and you can contact Steve at holographickinetics.com. You can also go to his website at holographickinetics.com to learn more. So for me, like with this space, it was a given. I knew that being that I was going to sign a year lease and I was going to be here long term, that I wanted the space to be clear, because I am myself working to get clear. So like, I don't want anything outside of me affecting me. And the amount of things that were in here, from argumentative energy, from human spirits, and it was all in the space. And my space is a little tiny studio, okay? I think she advertised it as a 16 by 16 room. And then I have like a closet for the bathroom and a closet for the kitchen, basically. It's a small space, and there was so much going on in the space. And intuitively, I just knew before I moved in here to not sleep in here until I had it cleared. So I set that up with the team in Australia before my move-in date to have it cleared. And it was once I already signed a deposit, once it was considered mine, once I had keys in hand. That's all very important, because then you can take over the metaphysics of the space. It becomes your game, and therefore you're responsible for that game and can have it cleared. With my last place, it was really interesting because I actually was impacted by the energies of the space before having it cleared. That's why I had it cleared. And like I said, I'd been living there for many years, and it was a place that I moved into after my divorce with my son. So what I noticed is that over time, like initially it felt fine. And honestly, even in the end, before I had it cleared, I was doing sessions, holographic kinetic sessions in my space. And what I found was like, I was having people come over and they thought the energy of my place was like amazing. They would like feel like it was so good. I, on the other hand, felt like it was heavy. Like I could feel anger in the space. I started noticing that my son and I would fight more when we were at home, but when we would leave, we wouldn't. And I even had back then it seemed crazy, but I'll explain that it wasn't, feeling that someone had gotten murdered in the space. It was so palpable to me over time as I cleared my own stuff. So as you clear your issues at the root cause with holographic kinetics, what happens is you're clearing out so much old energy from your body. You're clearing out all of those like old impactful reactors and actors from the past. and it allows you to get more clear, and you can feel things around you more easily, but not in a bad way, more just in a way that ascertains that it's not your stuff that you're picking up on. So it became very clear that it wasn't mine. And even to this extent that some things that I had already cleared, like some issues I had already looked at, were still affecting me. And I noticed that it was more when I was at home. Once I had that cleared, it was really interesting because one of the things was, and this is something we don't really consider most of the time, everything in nature is alive with its own spirit. Steve has taught me this, and the Aboriginal people have long known that everything in nature is alive with its own spirit. The earth, the trees, the rocks, everything is actually alive with its own spirit. And so one of the big things that was impacting the space that I was living in was that a tree had been cut down to build the condo that I was living in. And the spirit of that tree was very angry. Like I said, it felt nuts to feel like somebody had been murdered in the space, but that's exactly how it felt to me. Like, in an intuitive way, I just felt like that was the energy of the space. And then to go and read the email from them after and hear that a tree was murdered, it was cut down against its will, it didn't want to die, it didn't want to leave that space in order to make room for the condo to build it. This is how like subtle this stuff is, and to me that's not really subtle, because a tree is a life, you know. And I think so often we just think of these things as inanimate objects to move or do with what we want, and they're not at all. So it's really important too, like if you have land and you're considering building a place and you need to clear some trees, to talk to the trees and see about where to place the house, you know. Perhaps you could even have a land clearing, because they do that as well, to clear the land of anything that has happened in the past, any spirits that could be there or things impacting the energy of the space. And, you know, during that time, I'm sure you could ask, like, where would be a good place to build? There are trees that have lived a long life that would be fine with being moving on. And that's what the Aboriginal people knew, and they would actually ask the tree if they could cut it down to make something of it. And sometimes they would say yes, and sometimes they would say no, and they would direct them to an older tree that was fine with it to go talk to that tree. And I know in the US, this sounds a little off the wall because we're so not used to viewing things as having spirits, like things that aren't moving, that aren't like breathing in the way that we can see that humans are. But it's all very impactful, and everything has a right to life. Everything has a right to life. So anyway, once that tree was cleared, it was interesting because I was talking to a friend of mine about having had that done. And there was so much other stuff in the space, by the way. A lot of single moms had lived there with their teenage sons, which was like, you know, it really shows how like attracts like, you know. I moved into the space with a similar energy that I was vibrating at the time. And as I outgrew that through clearing my own issues, I began to be able to feel those things, right? Because when I wasn't clear, it's like the things in the space were adding to my issues, maybe in maybe intensity, I'm not sure. But once I cleared them, like, it was very obvious that it was coming from outside of me. And there were a lot of similarities between things that had been experienced in that space before I lived there and the things I had experienced in my own life. And so it was just all kind of like playing off each other, and that energy was getting fed from us. So once I cleared that, it was like a night and day difference. And going back, I was talking to a friend afterwards about how big of a difference it made, and how the spirit of the tree had been there and had been really angry. And what came up was, if I can't live here, nothing can. And I'm telling you, I could not keep a plant alive in that house. Granted, there wasn't a lot of natural light, so it was harder for that reason. But I could not keep a plant alive. Even like coleus, which is known to be a very easy to grow plant, I couldn't keep alive. The grass in the backyard, like when I moved in, it was all like weeds. There was hardly anything growing. And I did so many things to like plant plants out there and this and that, and they would just not do well, or they would get destroyed. One time there was a group when I woke up in the morning outside in the backyard cutting a tree down in the neighbor's yard, and branches had fallen into my yard, had actually knocked the fence down. They were all trampling all over these plants I had planted in the back and raking it to like rake up the other little sticks and branches from this tree they had just cut to like clean it up. But they were literally ruining the plants that I had planted there. Not a coincidence, okay? The tree was so angry that literally didn't want anything else growing there, including us. And, you know, once that was cleared out, it was such a huge difference. Like, the relationship with my son in that space got better. We stopped fighting. I stopped feeling like that anger in the space. I started to feel like inspired to decorate the place. In fact, I found all these different like furnishings and things to make the place better just off of like Facebook Marketplace. I found them used, and some things were free, some things were, you know, I paid minimal amount of money for to improve the space, okay? When I went to move out, I was like posting to sell things, and people were like blowing me up in messages because they wanted the stuff because it looked so good that they wanted to buy it. And that has everything to do with the energy of the space, okay? It is so vitally important that we think about these things when we're moving into a place, because you know what? Not everything is known about a place before we move in it. In fact, I know somebody recently who found out that their previous rental that they very smoothly got moved out of. And anyway, they found out that it had been used to make meth and meth use. That's huge because that opens up wormholes into other dimensions that can allow for things to come in that you do not want to be in the space affecting you and your children. And this person's kids were sick all of the time when they lived there, all of the time. And we knew there was something wrong. Like, it wasn't normal the amount of times that they were sick while living in this space. And this person got easily and smoothly moved out of that place because they had the intention of creating a life that was best for their kids. And so somebody actually had a rental and talked them into moving. They even lowered the rent to get them to move out of that place. And it wasn't like this person had anything against that place. They had no idea what was going on. But this is what happens when we have an intention. That's how much it can shift our reality. And the person that moved like didn't even have to really lift a finger to make this happen. It just like all lined up so perfectly on their path. So we don't always know the history of a place. It's really important to start, I think, with a clean slate. Sure, we might have our own stuff going on that we need to look at and clear. And I still do that. You know, right now I'm still clearing things that are affecting me and my reality. But we don't have to then be doubled up against things affecting us from our outside reality, from our own home. And kids are really susceptible to the energies of a place. So if you have young kids, it can be even more important to clear space. Now, with what I've learned and experienced for myself, I would never move into a place long term without having it cleared first. I just don't want that kind of energy in my life. I don't even want to have the possibility of something outside of me that was in that space before me affect me. And, you know, my teacher, Steve Richards, has found that things like, you know, a house sitting on the market, not selling for a long time, he's got practitioners in Australia that actually work to clear those houses and those properties, and they end up selling like right away. So, you know, there are all kinds of implications of how holographic kinetics can help us in this reality to live better lives. And this is just one of them. There are so many topics like this that it can have a positive impact on. So If you're interested, like I said, reach out to Steve at steve@holographic-kinetics.com to find out more. And I hope that you have a beautiful day. Like and subscribe to this video if this resonates with you so that it can get to other people who need to hear this message. Thank you for tuning in.